welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. The chill of the late October wind wasn't the only thing that seeped into my bones that evening. It was something far colder, a discovery that sent a shiver through my entire being. Our cozy, little apartment, once a sanctuary of love and trust, felt like a strange, foreign land as I stood in the threshold of our bedroom. "Hey, babe, could you grab my phone from my jacket? I think I left it in the pocket." Julia's voice floated from the kitchen, light and carefree, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. "Sure, just a sec." I called back, my voice strained under the weight of forced cheerfulness. As I reached for her sleek, gray jacket draped over the chair, the soft fabric felt oddly heavy in my hands. Fishing for her phone, my fingers brushed against something unexpected, an unopened pack of contraceptives. My heart pounded against my ribcage, my mind racing. We hadn't used those in years. Julia had long switched to another method for health reasons. A cold lump formed in my throat as I pulled out the small, rectangular box, turning it over in my shaking hands. The betrayal was palpable, a bitter taste of deception. Steeling myself, I pocketed the contraceptives and retrieved her phone, walking into the kitchen where she was humming to herself, chopping vegetables for dinner. "Here's your phone," I said, placing it a little too roughly on the counter. Her eyes flicked up to mine, a flash of confusion crossing her features. "Everything okay, Mark?" "Fine," I managed, the word like sandpaper on my tongue. "Just tired, I guess." She nodded, accepting the answer, but the slight crease of concern between her brows told me she sensed the shift in my demeanor. I needed answers, but outright confrontation wasn't my style. I wanted to understand the full scope of the deceit before showing my hand. Later that night, as Julia slept, I lay awake, the image of the contraceptives burning behind my eyelids. Who was she seeing? The question gnawed at me, an incessant, unyielding itch. Then a name whispered through my thoughts, one that made my stomach turn: Tommy. Her coworker Tommy, who was always too friendly, too interested in her life. The following day, I feigned a normal routine, kissing Julia goodbye as if my heart wasn't heavy with betrayal. I headed to a cafe near her office, a place she often frequented for lunch. I found a discreet corner and waited, watching the entrance like a hawk. Sure enough, Tommy arrived, his eyes scanning the cafe until they landed on a spot by the window. Minutes later, Julia walked in, her smile brightening as she saw him. My hands clenched under the table, the sight of their easy familiarity a punch to my gut. They sat, talked, and laughed, too absorbed in each other to notice the world around them. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language spoke volumes. When it was time for them to leave, they hugged, a moment too long for friends. My jaw clenched as I watched them part ways, each with a backward glance that spoke of longing. The pieces clicked together, a mosaic of betrayal. But something still didn't fit. The contraceptives, Tommy's known aversion to commitment, the puzzle was incomplete. I needed more pieces, more understanding before I could confront the truth of my crumbling marriage. With a plan slowly forming in my mind, I left the cafe, the cold air a minor discomfort compared to the chilling realization of my wife's betrayal. I was determined to unearth the full extent of her infidelity. And when I did, my revenge would be as calculated as it was devastating. My love might have been unconditional, but my vengeance would be anything but forgiving. The days following my unsettling discovery and subsequent spying unfolded like a high-stakes chess game. I maneuvered carefully, gathering information while maintaining the facade of a loving husband. But beneath the surface, my resolve hardened. I was determined to expose Julia's deceit and exact my revenge. On a brisk Tuesday morning, I decided to confront Tommy. I figured a direct approach might shake him up enough to slip and reveal something Julia hadn't. I caught him just as he was leaving their office building for a coffee break. "Tommy," I called out, my voice friendly yet firm. He turned, a surprised smile on his face. "Hey, Mark. What brings you here?" "We need to talk," I said, steering him into a nearby, less crowded cafe. His eyes narrowed, sensing the seriousness in my tone. Once seated, I cut straight to the chase. "I know about you and Julia," I stated, watching him closely. Tommy's face paled, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. "Look, Mark, I'm not here to make a scene," I interrupted. "I just want to know what's going on." He sighed, a defeated slump to his shoulders. "It's not what you think. Julia and we're just friends, really. Friends don't hug the way you two do, Tommy. And friends certainly don't need contraceptives," I pushed, observing his reaction closely. Tommy blinked, confusion etching his features. "Contraceptives? What are?" Before he could finish, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed to one of relief. This might actually explain a lot. "Here," he said, handing me the phone. The text on the screen was from Julia. "Tommy, please make sure you give those to Chris before you forget again." Chris. I frowned, a new name adding another layer to the mystery. Chris is a friend who's been going through a rough patch with his girlfriend. Julia was just helping him out by picking those up for him. "She's like that, always helping," Tommy explained hurriedly. The revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. Was I wrong? Was my suspicion misplaced? Determined to get to the bottom of it, I left Tommy and headed straight to the address he gave me for Chris. A small, run-down apartment on the east side of town. Knocking on the door, I was greeted by a lanky, nervous-looking guy in his 20s. "Can I help you?" he asked, peeking through a barely open door. "I'm a friend of Julia's," I started, unsure of his reaction. Chris's face softened. "Oh, Julia. Come in, man." Inside, the apartment was sparse, the air heavy with uncertainty. "Tommy mentioned you were having some troubles." I probed, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, it's been rough. My girlfriend, Lacey, she's been pushing for us to move forward. It's caused a lot of tension," Chris confessed, fidgeting with a small box on the table. "It was the contraceptives." "So, Julia was helping you with advice, mostly. And she picked those up for me because I was too embarrassed," Chris admitted, his cheeks reddening. I paused, absorbing the information. Julia's actions, seen through this new lens, appeared less sinister and more in line with the caring person I knew. A wave of guilt washed over me, but the seed of doubt wasn't entirely washed away. "Thanks for explaining, Chris." "I appreciate it," I said, standing to leave. Back home, I found Julia in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she cooked. The normalcy of the scene was jarring. "Julia," I began, my voice thick with emotion. "We need to talk." She turned, her smile fading as she noticed my serious tone. "What's wrong?" "It's about the contraceptives I found," I said, watching her closely for any sign of deceit. Her face registered shock, then understanding. "Oh, Mark, I can explain." "I know about Chris," I cut in, the weight of the past days heavy on my shoulders. The conversation that followed was long and fraught with tension, but necessary. Julia's tears and heartfelt explanations filled the gaps in my understanding, but the damage to our trust was palpable. As she spoke, the foundation of my planned revenge began to crumble, but the remnants of my hurt and betrayal lingered, fueling a new resolve. The truth might have been less sinister than I imagined, but it was clear that our relationship was frayed. And as we both stood amidst the emotional debris, I knew that the next steps would be crucial. Whatever came next, the scars of this ordeal would shape our futures, perhaps in ways neither of us could foresee. After the emotionally charged revelations, the air between Julia and me remained thick with unspoken words and lingering doubts. The truths uncovered brought relief but didn't erase the lingering shadows of mistrust. The calm that settled over the next few days was superficial, a delicate veneer that threatened to crack with any sudden movement. One evening, while Julia was out for a yoga class, I decided to delve deeper. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story, something lurking beneath the neatly tied ends. Her laptop lay open on the dining table, left in haste. I hesitated, knowing this breach of privacy could mean crossing a line from which there was no return. Sometimes you need to leap to see where you land, I muttered to myself, rationalizing my decision as I sat down and began to sift through her emails. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed in her password, an easy guess, the name of the street where we first met. Most of her emails were mundane, work schedules, newsletters, and a few spam messages. But then, a particular email caught my eye. It was from a name I didn't recognize, Miranda S. I clicked open the thread, and my heart started to race as I read through the exchanges. The emails were filled with intimate details, not of a physical affair, but of an emotional one. Julia had shared thoughts and feelings with Miranda, things she'd never shared with me. The depth of their connection was clear, and each word felt like a betrayal of its own. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I whispered into the silence, feeling the sting of tears. I was so engrossed in the emails that I didn't hear the front door open. "Mark?" Julia's voice echoed from the hallway, surprised and cautious. "What are you doing?" I couldn't look at her. "Who's Miranda?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Julia paused, the silence stretching painfully between us. Then, slowly, she walked over and sat down across from me. "She's someone I met at a writing workshop last year. We became close, yes. She's been a friend. A friend you tell things you never told your husband." I shot back, unable to mask the bitterness. Julia sighed, her eyes filled with regret. "It was never my intention to hurt you, Mark. I found a kindred spirit in her, someone who understood parts of me that I felt you didn't." "That doesn't make it hurt any less," I replied coldly. We sat there for a long time, the ticking of the kitchen clock punctuating our strained silence. Finally, Julia reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I need some air," I said, standing up abruptly and grabbing my jacket. Outside, the cold night wrapped around me, mirroring the chill in my heart. I walked aimlessly through the streets, each step leading me further into confusion and sorrow. How had we gotten here? Was our love not deep enough to share all parts of ourselves? As I wandered, lost in thought, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I opened it. "Meet me tomorrow. There's something you should know about Julia. M." The mysterious message was cryptic, and my mind raced with possibilities. Who was this M? Miranda? Or someone else? What more was there to know? The layers of secrecy seemed endless, and with each new revelation, the path to reconciliation seemed more fraught with obstacles. I turned back towards home, the weight of the night's discoveries pressing down on me. Tomorrow, I would meet this mysterious M, and maybe then I would find the key to the labyrinth of secrets that my marriage had become. But tonight, I would face Julia and the rift that had grown too large to ignore. The road to understanding was fraught with pain, but it was a path I knew we had to tread, together or apart. The morning after, with the mysterious text still burning a hole in my mind, I left the apartment before Julia awoke. The cool, brisk air did little to clear the fog of sleeplessness and anxiety that clung to me. As I walked toward the cafe where I was supposed to meet M, every possible scenario played out in my mind. Each was more disconcerting than the last. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. I chose a table in the corner, where I could see the door. My heart skipped when it opened, but it was just a regular morning rush of commuters, not the mysterious texter. Minutes ticked by like hours until finally, the door swung open again, revealing not Miranda, as I had suspected, but a man, middle-aged, wearing a neat, gray suit. He scanned the cafe, his gaze settling on me. As he approached, my apprehension grew. "Mark?" he asked, extending a hand. "I'm Michael, Julia's brother." Confusion washed over me. Her brother. But Julia never mentioned. Michael sat, cutting off my protest. "I know, and I'm sorry for the secrecy. Julia doesn't know I'm here. She and we've had our differences." His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed a deep concern. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked, still wary. "It's about Julia's work, her research," he began, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She's on the verge of a major breakthrough in her field, something that could change lives. But, she's been threatened because of it." I leaned in, my earlier anger giving way to a surge of protectiveness. "Threatened? By whom?" "Competitors, maybe even some she considers colleagues," Michael explained. "I'm here because she needs protection, not just from them but perhaps even from herself." The pieces started to fit together, forming a picture far different from any I had imagined. Is this why she's been so distant? Why she's had these secret conversations and meetings? Yes, Michael nodded. She's been under a tremendous amount of stress. I think she found a friend in Miranda, someone unconnected to her work, where she could just be herself, without the weight of her research on her shoulders. The realization hit me hard. I had mistaken her secrecy and her emotional unavailability as signs of infidelity, but it had been something else entirely, a burden of a different sort. "Does she know her life might be in danger?" I asked, the urgency clear in my voice. "I don't think she realizes how serious it is. That's why I contacted you. You're her husband, Mark. She might listen to you if you talk to her, help her understand that she needs to be more cautious." The meeting ended with Michael giving me documents and evidence of the threats Julia faced. As I walked home, I felt a profound shift within me. My mission had changed from confronting a potentially unfaithful spouse to protecting the woman I loved. When I opened the door to our apartment, Julia was waiting, her expression a mix of worry and relief. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice trembling. I pulled her close, the papers from Michael in my hand. "We need to talk, Julia. It's about your work." As I explained everything, Julia listened, her eyes widening in shock. "I didn't want to worry you," she murmured. "I thought I could handle it." "We'll handle it together," I promised, feeling a renewed bond between us. In the days that followed, we took steps to secure her work and her safety. With my support, Julia pressed on with her research, achieving the breakthrough Michael had spoken of. Her success brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for us to rebuild and strengthen our relationship. The surprise ending wasn't just about unmasking a secret affair or discovering a hidden enemy. It was about the realization that trust and communication are the foundations upon which love and safety are built. And sometimes, the biggest surprises come not from dramatic revelations, but from understanding the true depths of our commitments to each other.